Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about functions, and you know, they are used quite a bit in algebra in different ways, and then we'll go later on into talking about the range and domain of functions. But right now, we're just going to do a brief introduction as to what a function is and how to define it and how to look and see if a relationship between two variables is a function. So the definition of a function is you have a relationship between two or more variables, and in this case we'll just say y and x, and we'll have a constant here. We'll call it c, the constant. And this could be any integer or a real number. I mean, it could be uh, the constant over here. I mean, theoretically, the c could equal, um, that could be it could be an integer like 3. It could be square root of 8, for a radical. It can be any number, really. It could be your constant. But the main thing you're looking for uh, to determine if a relationship is a function is the relationship between this dependent variable and the independent variable x. And basically what we're looking for in a relationship is how does the value of y depend on the value of one or more variables that you're trying to graph. So in this case, we would call x the independent variable because it can vary uh, based on whatever input that we have. And y would be the dependent variable because the value of y depends on what x is. So this first question that we're given, we'll clear all that off here, maybe. There we go. So this first question we're given is to determine whether each relation defines y as a function of x. So we have x squared plus y cubed equals negative 8. And the first thing we're going to do, since they asked us to look at it y in terms of x, is we're going to subtract x squared from both sides of this equation. And that will give us y cubed equals a minus 8 minus x squared. And if we find, if y cubed, y times y equals a minus 8 minus x squared, then 1y would equal the cubed root of minus 8, fill that in, minus x squared. So right here, this gives us a relationship between what the value of y is depending on what the value of x is. Now we can come along, now we have this relationship, and we can just draw a simple little chart over here and fill in some numbers for x and y, and it will show us what that relationship is. And when x is 0, you're going to have y equals the cubed root of negative 8, and that's going to be a negative 2. So, nice straight line there. So when x is 1, you're going to have minus 8 minus 1. So y is going to be the cubed root of negative 9. And when x is negative 1, we'll also get the cubed root of negative 9. Now we're not going to fill in all these. I mean, certainly we could, but the main thing that we can see just from how this equation is set up, that y equals the cubed root of negative x minus x squared, is that there's only one for the x's that we've plugged in here. There's only one possible value of y. I mean, if this were, for instance, theoretically, if y were equal to the square root of x, then if x were, say, when x was 9, then y could be plus or minus 3. Because there's a possibility that, negative 3 times a negative 3 is also equal to 9. So in that case, there's not a one-to-one relationship. But in the equation that we're working with here, our y cubed, our y equals the cubed root of minus 8 minus x squared. For each value of x, there's only one possible value for y. So, and that one-to-one relationship is what defines a function. For one value of x, you have one possible value of y. If you have that one-to-one relationship, 1 to 1, that's a function. So 1y for 1x is a function. Now that doesn't mean that it's got to be a unique value of y, because we've shown right over here that it's the same value of y, whether it's 1, x is 1, or x is negative 1. But what that means is if you have a value of x, you only have one possible value for y. If we were to look at this graph, we'll go to our graphing program here, and we'll just type this in: x squared plus y cubed equals negative 8. And you can see there's the graph of that function. We now know it's a function. And we can see that for each value of x, there's only one possible value of y. Now, there's a test. If you have a picture of a graph like this, if you have the graph that is shown, there's a test you can do easily to see if a relationship is a function or not. If you draw a vertical line, and I'm just going to pick one here, x equals 4. No reason, just that's decided to do. If x equals 4, if there's a vertical line here, and this line only intercepts this graph at one location, all along the function, then that is a function. If you can draw a vertical line and it only intercepts this graph at one location, then that's a function. If it were to intercept at 2 spots, then that would mean there was 2 possible values of y, and that would mean it's not a function. And I can show you that. I should be able to show you that. If I were to switch these around. So to show you what do we mean, and I'll just change this around so that now instead we have x cubed and y squared. And now you'll see, and we'll change this location of this graph here. So you can see now I've drawn a vertical line through this relationship, and it intercepts it at 2 points here. So when x is, and it's negative 5, we'll make it 6. When x is negative 6, y could be up here at 14, or it could be negative 14. So for this possible value of x, there's 2 possible values of y, so that means it is not a function. So the second problem that we're given, instead of an actual equation like what we were shown in the first problem, this is, that's terrible. This is a set of numbers. So you have the point negative 2 and 1, the point negative 2 and 0, and the point negative 1 and 1. And they're asking whether or not this determines, describes really a function or not. Well, based on what we were just talking about, a function is if there's a one-to-one relationship between x and y. And we can see right here, when x is -2, y could be either 1 or y could be 0. So for -2, for when x is -2, y is 1 or y is 0. So because you don't have a one-to-one relationship, this is not a function. It has to be a one-to-one. So x is -2, y is equal to 1 or 0. So this is not a function. So that kind of explains a little bit about functions, and if you have a graph of a relationship, how to tell quickly if it's a function or not, just by drawing a vertical line and seeing if it intercepts at one place which would make it a function, or if it's more than one spot, then it's not a function.